Vijay Raghavan will be presiding this national seminar of Vijay Raghavan.
ফান্ডিং করছেন বলেও সূত্র মারফত খবর সেই ফান্ডিং এ তাপসী মণ্ডলকে হলদিয়ার বিধায়ককে
নাম শুরু হয়ে গেছে
অনুষ্ঠানে নিয়ে আসার পরিকল্পনা তাপসী মণ্ডলকে হলদিয়ার বিধায়ককে
নাম শুরু হয়ে গেছে
Dear comrades, this is a special session.
এ বাবা ইন্ডিয়ান নিউজটা
We have decided
এখানে কাউন্ট দেখাবে
in connection with the dear comrades. This is a special session for India Transport Union. We have decided
কাউন্ট দেখাবে
in connection with the dear comrades. This is a special session for India Transport Union. We have decided in connection with the dear comrades. Multifaceted issues related to the agriculture workers and other toiling masses in rural. That is a
ঠিক হয়ে গেছে
struggle against the pernicious policies pursued by
ঠিক আছে তো
the ruling class in India
চলু হ্যাঁ চলু
and
কাছে 2 ঘন্টা চলবে না 2 ঘন্টা
the impact of that policies and also our fight against that policies. We, an organization and also expressing their views against these policies. Therefore, when we are discussing about the proceedings of this conference, we decided to invite those intellectuals who are always with us, vociferously criticizing the policies of the government, and some of them are good activists who are always projecting the alternative against these policies. In that way, this evening is important for us, since those important personalities who we are invited are with us. I do not want to introduce all of them. They are all well-known personalities in their respective areas. Some of them are well-known political personalities. One of Comrade Prakash is with us. Then all the others are writing, they are engaging, they are also in the forefront with us in our struggle. So this seminar will be inaugurated by Comrade Prakash Karat. So, on behalf of this conference and on behalf of you all, I would like to invite Comrade Prakash Karat to inaugurate this session of the conference. Thank you.
The president of this seminar, Comrade Vijay Raghavan, my fellow panelists on this seminar, Professor Madhura Swaminathan and Professor Ram Kumar, and Comrade Vikash Bhattacharya, leaders of the All India Agricultural Workers Union on the dais, and delegate comrades and friends. First of all, I wish to convey my warm greetings to all the delegates who are attending this 10th conference of the All India Agricultural Workers Union. I don't know whether I should speak in English or Hindi. I think more people may understand Hindi, or maybe I shall combine both. I have been asked today to speak on the Hindutva corporate nexus and the role of the left in fighting it. When we talk about the Hindutva corporate nexus, we are characterizing the present regime in our country, the Modi government. Because this Modi government represents both these forces, the Hindutva RSS led Hindutva forces and the big bourgeois led corporates. It is an alliance of these two forces which provide the twin pillars for this regime. And the Modi government has been in power from 2014, and nearly 9 years have passed, and this government has consolidated itself. The BJP has consolidated in this period and become the dominant political force in the country. So first of all, it is important to understand how this has come about. And our characterization of this regime as based on this Hindutva corporate alliance, what does it mean in terms of the politics of our country, the economics, and for society at large? It is only when we grasp the significance of this Hindutva corporate alliance can we also understand the consequences of this regime and then work out our strategy on how to fight against this regime and eventually to overcome it and to overthrow it. हमारे देश में अभी जो सरकार है, उस सरकार का चरित्र जो है वो हिंदुत्व और कॉर्पोरेट्स के गठजोड़ पर आधारित है। और जिस तरह आरएसएस के नेतृत्व वाली जो हिंदुत्व का जो ताकत है हमारे देश में, उसका मेल हुआ है हमारे देश के बड़े पूंजीपतियों के साथ, और यही गठजोड़ मोदी सरकार का पिछले 9 साल से जो राज करने का हमारा अनुभव है, इस सरकार को राजनीतिक तौर पर और आर्थिक तौर पर उनको शक्ति दी है। तो जब तक हम ये बात को नहीं समझ पाएंगे कि इस गठजोड़ का क्या मतलब है, उसका क्या असर है राजनीतिक तौर पर, आर्थिक तौर पर, और उससे हम रणनीति नहीं बनाते हैं इनके खिलाफ संघर्ष करने के लिए, लड़ने के लिए, तभी हम कामयाब होंगे राजनीतिक तौर पर इस सरकार के खिलाफ और बीजेपी आरएसएस जो गठजोड़ है उसके खिलाफ संघर्ष करके उसको परास्त करने के लिए. तो we have seen in this 9 years the most systematic effort made by the Modi government to aggressively pursue neoliberal policies. And everyone knows that in these 9 years, the entire big bourgeoisie of our country has come out in full support of the Modi government and the BJP RSS as the ruling combination. It is popularly often talked about how Modi government has promoted crony capitalism. It is a fact that the Modi government and Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself has his favored capitalists, who are his favorites. Everybody is talking about Gautam Adani nowadays. But it is a fact that thanks to the patronage of Narendra Modi and his government, the Adani group has made the most spectacular advance in terms of its growth, its assets, and its reach in every sector of the economy. We should not forget that this government has been favorable to the big bourgeoisie as a whole. The entire big bourgeoisie is in full support with this government. What is striking is you do not find any fraction or section of the big bourgeoisie which is not happy with the Modi government or is even in opposition or unfavorable to the Modi government. And that is one of the strengths of the BJP and the government. Because if you look at the whole Hindutva ideology and how it has developed under the RSS, right from the beginning, the RSS has never been in any sense anti-capitalist, or in fact, it has been the most staunch advocate of private enterprise from the beginning. And the first incarnation of the BJP, the Bharatiya Jansan, the Jansan was a right-wing party which advocated free enterprise and free market policies. When the Narasimha Rao government in 1991, when the first Manmohan Singh budget was presented in the Lok Sabha, then L.K. Advani, who was then the BJP leader, he got up and said that you have finally accepted the policies we have advocated. You have come round to implementing the policies which we have always advocated. Because the RSS was from the beginning opposed to any form of state-sponsored capitalism during the days of the Nehru government. They were against the public sector, 5-year plans, etc. So it is but natural that the big bourgeoisie of our country finds the RSS, BJP combine its most congenial form of political government which can advance its interests. And that we have seen in these last 9 years. On the one hand, the Modi government has been, unlike the more weaker or more vacillating UPA governments, which could not push through fully the neoliberal policies. They tried, of course, at various times, but could not really go the full hog. They find that the Modi government is more willing to take the necessary steps and even the risks to go ahead with, for example, large-scale privatization of the public sector and to provide all sorts of concessions to the big corporates, whether in the form of extending financial loans, credit from the banks, and giving them access to natural resources, allowing them environmental clearances, getting them land and other resources at cheap rates. In all these aspects, we have found that the Modi government has gone ahead. And the second term of the Modi government, that is the 2019, post-2019 Lok Sabha election, we have seen how they have really stepped up this drive for privatization and for further implementation of pro-corporate policies. I'm not going to go into all these details except to point out that the corporates of our country, the big bourgeoisie of our country, are extremely happy with the Modi government. It is not just Adanis and Ambanis, for example. The Tatas, for example, one of the bigger, older, big business houses. If you talk to the top executives of the Tatas, they will speak about the Modi government in glowing terms. So it's the entire strata of the big bourgeoisie which is extending full support to the Modi government. And there were people who thought earlier that the Hindutva communalism and the Hindutva ideology will find no takers among sections of the big bourgeoisie, who would be worried about the divisive impact of this ideology, leading to social strife and social divisions, which is not good for capitalism and business. But far from it, we are finding that every section of the big bourgeoisie and the corporates are extending support also to the RSS and the Modi government. And they have joined the bandwagon of Hindutva nationalism. That is, Modi keeps saying, we are going to make India a great power. We are going to become one of the big powers in the world, and our economy is going to develop as an economy of a superpower. And the capitalist class, the big bourgeoisie, thinks this is an open invitation for them to grow and expand. And therefore, you find the most unlikely sections of the big corporates becoming cheerleaders for the for Hindutva. We should not forget that Ratan Tata in 2015 went to Nagpur to pay obeisance to the Samadhi of Hegdewar and to meet Mohan Bhagwat. And I can give you a list of all the big corporate honchos who have gone to Nagpur at some time or the other to pay their respects to the RSS Sarsang Chalak and to make peace with him and to assure him that they are with the RSS project of Hindutva. So here is this marriage between the Hindutva forces and the big bourgeoisie of our country. And it is this combination of the Hindutva forces and the big bourgeoisie which is driving the authoritarian character of this government, which is driving authoritarianism. Because both these forces need to have an authoritarian regime and preferably eventually a one-party rule in this country. The Hindutva RSS forces have to impose their Hindutva ideology, the goal of a Hindu Rashtra, onto the entire society, including the minorities. And this can be done only by force and by use of repressive methods. And therefore, authoritarianism is the natural form in which the Hindutva forces will seek to advance towards the Hindu Rashtra. And for the big corporates, a form of authoritarianism which suppresses the rights of the working people, of the working class, of the peasantry, of the agricultural workers, which suppresses the movements and struggles of the working people, which suppresses any oppositional form of politics. This also is what they would welcome, as they feel that this creates the best climate for their doing business. So this marriage or this alliance which has come into being is different from the earlier periods. We know the big bourgeoisie is the dominant strata of our ruling classes. We know that all previous governments or ruling parties represented the interests of the bourgeois landlord alliance led by the big bourgeoisie. But there is a qualitative change in the sense that the Hindutva forces are seeking not to continue with the existing political setup which has been created by the bourgeois landlord classes. They are working to reshape the Indian political system, reshape the Indian Union as it is, and also eventually reframe the Indian Constitution. All, of course, working from within the framework of parliamentary democracy and the Constitution. So, this project very much depends on its being able to also deliver something to the people economically, because Hindutva alone cannot inspire the people, and Hindutva alone cannot carry the people and towards the goal of Hindu Rashtra. It requires the economic muscle and the heft of having a strong economy, however centralized and authoritarian it is. So these two forces coming together represent the gravest threat to our democracy, to the Indian Constitution, and to the political framework that we have built up since independence. तो मैं ये गठजोड़ के बारे में बता रहा था कि एक तरफ आरएसएस के लिए हिंदुत्व के विचारधारा को पूरे देश में थोपने के लिए, समाज में थोपने के लिए और हिंदू राष्ट्र कायम करने के लिए उनके लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि हमारे देश के जो सबसे ताकतवर जो शासक वर्ग का हिस्सा है, जो हमारे देश के इजारेदार पूंजी है, उनके समर्थन उनको हासिल करना बहुत जरूरी है। उन्हीं के माध्यम से उनका जो नारा है कि हम जो एक मजबूत, एक शक्तिशाली राष्ट्र को कायम करेंगे, जो पूरी दुनिया में शक्तिशाली देशों में उनका सूची में आएगा, वो उनको उस लक्ष्य को पूरा करना है तो आर्थिक हमारी शक्ति को बढ़ाने की जरूरत है। और वो सोचते हैं कि हमारे देश के जो बड़े पूंजीपति हैं उन्हीं को प्रोत्साहन करके उनके बल पर ही हम इस तरह के महाशक्ति बन सकते हैं। तो दोनों के लिए अपने अपने हित है। एक तो हिंदू राष्ट्र कायम करने के लिए उनका जो प्रयास है और हमारे देश के बड़े पूंजीपतियों के जो हित है कि वो और पूंजी इकट्ठा करे और शक्तिशाली बने, उसके लिए वो हिंदुत्व की सहारा लेते हैं। क्योंकि हिंदुत्व का अगर प्रभुत्व कायम होता है, as we are seeing more and more in many parts of the country, especially in North India and Western India, Hindutva is become part of the popular consciousness. They have been able to penetrate the consciousness of the people. And once that happens, you will find that the same working people, the same masses who get permeated with the Hindutva consciousness, they will never be able to take up the struggle against the neoliberal system, take up the struggle against those political parties and forces which are having policies which attack their very livelihood and standards of living. So, it is very important for us to understand that fighting against the neoliberal policies of this government and of the ruling classes will not succeed unless we simultaneously carry out the struggle against the Hindutva forces and their ideology and their divisive politics. Of course, organizing, mobilizing and struggling on the basic issues of the people, different sections of the working people, the working class, the peasantry, the agricultural workers, the vast mass of oppressed sections, whether it is Dalits, Adivasis, minorities, all these struggles have to develop, and they are the basis for us to take on the Hindutva corporate regime. But that alone is not by itself sufficient, because, as I said, once Hindutva succeeds in spreading its poisonous and divisive ideology among the people, you will find it very difficult to unite all these different sections of people to fight against the ruling classes and the bourgeois landlord system. We are seeing that in our daily experience, where we find people come out in struggles, but after the struggle, they do not, the consciousness is not there that the struggle must lead to struggle against the political system and the political forces who are responsible for the exploitation and oppression of the different sections of the people. Because their thinking has already been molded in a different way. That is to think that more important for them is the pan-Hindu identity that is being sought to be created, which overcomes their own oppressed state of affairs, whether they belong to the Dalits, whether they belong to the Adivasis or other oppressed sections. Even these sections are sought to be brought into the pan-Hindu identity. And if you are not taking on Hindutva, if you are not going to the same rural poor or agricultural workers who are Dalits and belong to the oppressed caste, they are being given a vision that you're all going to become part of this great Hindu nation. And you are also, whether you are the most oppressed, but then you are going to be part of the grand Hindu order, you see. And they co-opt all the socially oppressed sections into this great pan-Hindu order which they are building. And once that process takes place, it diverts and setbacks all the efforts to fight unitedly and to create an alternative, a political alternative to the Hindutva forces. So it is very necessary to understand when we say Hindutva corporate alliance or Hindutva corporate nexus, that there is a dual task or a twofold task before us, which is while struggling against the big attack on the livelihood of the people, on their basic rights, that struggle can only advance and come to fruition if at the same time the very forces which are attacking the livelihood of the people and imposing these policies, their ideological offensive among the people is also met and countered. Are we doing this? I think one of the weaknesses that we have in our movement, in the overall left and democratic movement, and in the movement of the specific sections of our working people, whether it is the trade unions, the organizations of the working class, whether it is the Kisan organizations, whether it's the organizations of the agricultural workers, etc. We are not paying sufficient attention to the second task, which is the same people we are taking up, going to organizing them, mobilizing them. We are not looking at the ideological, political and social influences which are every day being, they are bombarded with through the social media. Today, most people, even an agricultural worker, gets his political messaging through WhatsApp in a mobile phone. And you'll find in the most remote area during the 2019 Lok Sabha election, I still remember a report about an agricultural worker who was asked about his living conditions by a newspaper correspondent. He said, conditions are very bad. I don't get enough work. I find it hard to feed my children, all that. Then he's asked, who are you going to vote for? This is in Uttar Pradesh. And he said, Modi. He said, why? Because he has made India the 5th biggest power in the world. India has become the 5th biggest power in the world today. At that time. Now they're saying they'll make it the 3rd biggest. So this propaganda is there going constantly at the most oppressed and deprived sections. So to the same Dalit agricultural worker, unless we are able to explain to him or her that Hindutva means, though they are saying they are going to include all of you in this great pan-Indian Hindu order, but essentially it will eventually be a upper caste Brahminical order that will be imposed on you. And the root of your oppression, social oppression, which has been there for centuries, that will get strengthened or reinforced in some way if Hindu Rashtra is going to come into this country. Are we able to take this message to the agricultural workers amongst whom we are working? There is a mechanical approach where we say we take up their basic questions about wages, land, MNREGA, etc., etc. And there must be a political party which will take up the political, ideological work. Yes, to some extent that is true, but it is no more holds good anymore in our country, because the RSS project, the Hindutva project, is all embracing, and RSS organizations are working 365 days a year, round the clock, in all sections of people, in all sections of society, introducing this pernicious ideology. And the fact that they have succeeded in many places, in many parts of the country, is the reason why today we are finding the BJP has become a consolidated political force, because behind it is the RSS with this ideological work. So, to fight the to sum up, to fight the Hindutva corporate regime, you have to carry forward this dual struggle. How do we put out the struggle to different sections of the people? We have not given enough thought to it, attention to it. There's no use saying they're communal. With no use of saying this is a communal organization or communal politics. How exactly is Hindutva ideology reactionary? How is it divisive? How is it going to affect your lives eventually? This has to be put in the appropriate manner among different sections of the people. This big work has to be done by organizations which are actually working among these sections of people. It can't be done from outside. The main preliminary work has to be done by them. So, if we do not take up this work, you will find that always our work will be only 50% complete, or our political advance will not come about because we are not able to take up this dual task. Fighting the corporates and neoliberal policies is fine. We have been doing it all these years for the last nearly 3 decades. But fighting against the Hindutva ideology and all that it represents requires much more effort, much more thought, much more visualization of how it should be presented and taken to the people, and in what form, in what ways. This, once we are able to combine this together, it's a dialectical process. Both will strengthen the other. The more we develop our united big struggles, uniting the sections of the people, that will help us to go amongst these people to take our ideological and political message also. And the more we do the second work, the more you will find we are able to bring sections of people who have been away from common movements and struggles because of the various types of divisive ideologies in politics. So combining these two is the imperative task for us. And I hope that in this conference also, where you will be discussing a whole range of issues, some attention is paid also to how the most dominant political force in our country today, the RSS and the BJP, how they are taking their politics and ideology to the people, all sections of people, including the rural poor. How do we combat that? If we are able to work out our tactics in doing that, it will help us to make a big advance in the coming days in successfully fighting against the Hindutva corporate regime, which is what the Modi government represents. Thank you.
So, comrades, thank you to Comrade Prakash Karaj. Since he is leaving quite earlier, now we are presenting a gift to Comrade Prakash. Today morning, some painter who was here, his 5 canvas pictures has been painted by him, and now Comrade Dilip Ghosh, he will present one canvas picture to Comrade Prakash Karaj. It's okay to upside. He's speaking. So for all five. So, comrade, now, comrade Madhira Swaminathan, she deliver her speech.
Good evening, Presiding Comrade Vijay Raghavan, Comrade Venkat, dignitaries on the stage, on the presidium, all the delegates. I'm very happy to be here back in Howrah after quite a long time. But it's good to be with old friends again. I'm going to talk about food security, but I want to expand the concept of food security today and focus really on work and employment security, which I think is very critical for agricultural workers as well as others, of course. So when we talk about food security, definition that is used is when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs. It's a long sentence from FAO, but what it's saying is you need adequate quantity of food. It has to be of the right quality, safe food. It has to be nutritious. So nobody can survive just on rice and atta, chapati. You need a diverse diet. You need the conditions like safe water and sanitation so that food, nutritious food, is absorbed. And most important, you need physical and economic access, which means food should be available, not just available in the country. We know that this year 240 million tons is going to be the production of rice and wheat. It's another record again this year. It has to be available at each and every village. It has to be available locally, and it has to be affordable. So I want to spend a little time on this affordability, because I think in some way in India, if we look at the different components of food security, physical production has been growing up. So availability at the national level has been increasing, but that is not the case at the individual level. So what is happening here? I'd like to spend a few minutes on that. I think I want to start, I wasn't going to say this, but after hearing what Comrade Prakash has said, that India is the 5th in the world, India is the 3rd in the world, now we are the chair of G20, every day there is some chest thumping. How are we doing in terms of food security? You all know that in the Global Hunger Index, our rank has fallen. And if I remember, it is something like 137 out of 150 countries. So 150 countries in the world, we are at the bottom. We are at 137. I want to give another indicator, which is new, from a report called State of Food Insecurity. It is an annual report published by the Food and Agricultural Organization in Rome. And in 2020, they came out with a new definition of food security. They said, what is the money needed to buy food which just gives you enough energy, the calories? So, the doctor says 2000 calories or 2,300, 400, whatever the calorie norm. How much money do you need, or how much kilograms of rice and wheat do you need to just barely cover those calories? That they call energy sufficient. And the Indian poverty line is just about covering that energy sufficient line. Of course, Modi government has dropped the poverty line, but that's a different matter. Second, they talk about what is the it's called nutrient adequate. So you get enough calories, proteins, fat, you get different components of nutrition, but it's again the least cost. You may not want nutrition from dal, a particular kind of dal, but is allocated to you. The third, and what is the preferred option, is what they call a healthy diet. Every human being must have a right to a healthy diet which has enough, not just your rice and wheat, it has all your pulses, it has egg, meat, fish, whatever your choice, fruit, vegetables, milk. And the shocking fact that has come out of this study is that about 800 million people in India do not have means, do not have enough income to get a healthy diet. And the majority of them are in rural areas. So 70% of Indians, and more in the rural, little less in urban, do not have enough income to get a healthy diet. So we may be number one or number two or number three on many indicators, but when it comes to the basic right, human right of having a healthy diet, South Asia, and actually Bangladesh is a little better than us, so we are in the same boat with Pakistan on this, and Afghanistan. These are the three worst countries in South Asia. Nepal, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka now has problems, but earlier Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh are all doing better than India. So on this indicator, we are among the worst in the world. And I think this is the problem. This is what we need to highlight, that whatever the rate of growth has been, whatever the expansion has been, we've not had that kind of economic growth, but whatever the achievements we talk about on the world stage, we must talk about this lack of achievement in terms of food security. I think I can go on without going to Hindi. Is that okay? So let me come now to how do we ensure this healthy diet? And I will talk very briefly about the PDS, the ration shop, and then I'll go to the second thing which I think is very important and not discussed when we talk about food security, which is employment security. So the PDS, as you know, with a lot of pressure during COVID, in April 2020, after many state governments, starting with Kerala, had already improved the distribution of food through the ration shops, had doubled the grain, had introduced a variety of commodities. The government of India also brought in this scheme for additional rice, wheat, and 1 kilo of dal. Now, in January of 2023, they have withdrawn this scheme. Now, the question is, I'm telling you that 800 million people cannot afford a healthy diet. So what would we want? For PDS, 90,000 crore rupee is the reduction in the budget of 2023. Actually, we need an expansion in the budget so that everyone gets, as I said, not just rice and wheat, but gets dal, gets oil, gets spices, gets egg, gets milk. So instead of expanding the reach, whether it is of school meals or ICDS or PDS, this government has cut back even the small amount that was being given, forced on by the COVID crisis. Now, so I think the PDS story, the ration story, all of you know, you're on the ground, you've struggled for an expansion. And at this time, after 2 years of the COVID, when the economy has not recovered, most importantly, when employment has not recovered, it's really cruel that the PDS is being, they're acting as though there has been no pandemic, as though employment is not worse off, as though people's incomes have not fallen, poverty has not risen. Actually, all these things have happened, but we don't have the data. There is no data on poverty. So we don't know whether poverty has risen, but I think all of you, more than me, you're working in different parts of the country, you will agree that poverty has risen. All the employment statistics show that unemployment was huge and has not come back to the pre-COVID level. So in this situation of an economic crisis, which is important, actually the rate of economic growth had been declining in India under the Modi government even before COVID came. Then there has been a very sharp reduction. And if you read the budget papers, it all sounds like, if you read the economic survey, that everything is back to normal. We have every chapter of that economic survey, I don't know if Ramkumar has it, has a title showing that things are back to normal, subtitle on every aspect of the economy. So let me now turn to the rural employment scenario, because as the Agricultural Workers Union, I think this is something that you are all debating every day. And I would like to place a few facts about the rural economy and the worsening situation. First, on employment. With mechanization, now mechanization is inevitable. I'm not opposing mechanization, but mechanization has accelerated also with COVID, as we all know, because there were restrictions on meeting with people, hiring a large number of workers. Agricultural employment has declined. And this is something irreversible. It is not going to increase again. Second, non-agricultural employment. Non-agricultural employment, as we know, collapsed during COVID because all the non-agricultural enterprises, all the urban manufacturing services all had to shut down. And third, the one lifeline, which is NREGA, which could have provided 100 days of employment per household as it is supposed to. Actually, last year, the days of employment, if I am right, is 42 days per household on average, which is the lowest ever, one of the lowest ever. So agricultural employment has declined in the last 2 years, and this is going to be the trend. So I think this is something that is to be discussed. How do we address this question? How do we find alternatives, forms of employment for our agricultural men and women workers? Second, non-agricultural employment has, now a very important feature of non-agricultural employment is it's very limited for women workers. Because for non-agricultural employment, you have to usually travel outside the village. And there are, of course, women who are working outside. There are women who are migrating with their families. But if you look at the calendar of employment of a woman worker in India, there's very little non-agricultural employment because it's only what is available nearby. And this is why NREGA, 70% of NREGA workers have been women workers. Not because of a quota. Quota was 30%. but because it's employment available near their homes or transport is arranged, there's a group which goes and works there. There are some norms in terms of the working conditions to some extent. So days of employment are shrinking, and this is something that I think we have to seriously think about, because I think in terms of mechanization, some of it is irreversible. Now, income depends on days of employment and wages or wage rates. And I now want to turn to what has happened to rural wages. And I'm drawing on the work of many of my colleagues from the Foundation for Agrarian Studies who are here. In November 2022, 3 months ago, the latest statistic from Government of India says that average wage rate for an agricultural job task, this is all India average, was 363 rupees for a man and 299 or less than 300 for a woman worker. Average non-agricultural wage rate in rural areas was 350 for men and 250 for women. So 360 and 350. For men in rural areas, the average wage for agriculture and non-agriculture is not very different. Now, we expected that economic growth, diversification, construction boom, all this will push up the non-agricultural wage rate. But that has not happened. So the pressure is to keep the wage rate low, even in non-agriculture. And NREGA clearly has not been any kind of, as the landlords like to say, because of NREGA, wage rates are going up, but clearly that is not the case. Secondly, for women, the agricultural wage rate, 299 rupees, is more than the non-agricultural wage rate, 250 rupees. So again, for women, the options firstly are not available, and even if they go for non-agricultural employment, the wage rate is actually lower than for agriculture. So options again for women workers, both in terms of employment and in terms of wage rate, remain much worse than for men. Now, secondly, in many states, and in total, if you look at the average wage in all states, about 50% of men workers are not getting the notified minimum wage, and 70% of women workers are not getting the notified minimum wage. So even where the minimum wage may be low, the point here is that the data are very clearly showing that 50% of men and 70% of women are not getting the minimum notified minimum wage, which was, or even the recommendation of the Satpathy committee, which was 375 rupees, but that was in 2018. Now in 2022, the average is about 350 or 60 for men. The third point, and very important, of course, and I think that is what gives hope, is that there's huge variation across India. As I think all of you know, the highest wage rates are in Kerala. In 2022 November, the wage rate was 856 for men and 592 for women workers. But I think it's not the claps that we want, it's that why are wage rates still so low in so many parts of India. Jammu and Kashmir, after Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Haryana. These are the 4 or 5 states with the higher wage rate. And at the bottom, along with Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, is Gujarat. I'll tell you the wage rate in Gujarat was 275 for men and 269 for women. So that's one more statistic for the Gujarat model. This is the level of wage rates for agricultural workers, men and women in Gujarat. Now, the last point on wage rate that I wanted to make is that in the period just prior, in the period from about 2008-9 to 14, rural wage rates had a reasonably high rate of growth. Of course, rate of growth means that if you are starting low, even with a high rate of growth, you don't reach much. But just before the pandemic, if you take the period 2014-15 to 18-19, the 5 years before the pandemic, the real wage growth had fallen already, 2.5% to 3% per annum. So as I said in the beginning, even before COVID crisis came, the rate of growth of the rural economy was already slowing down. And that is reflected in the rate of growth of the real wages also slowing down. And of course, after COVID, there was an absolute decline in wage rates. Not surprising, because we know so many workers had to leave the cities and come back to the rural areas. So there was increasing surplus labor available. There were no other tea shops or construction or other activities going on. So people were willing to go for whatever employment at whatever wage. And this year, in the last year, after 2021-22, and this is what the government is now saying, wage rates are growing again. Yes, there is a small increase in this 1 year of 20 rupees on average for men and 16 rupees for women. So this is a pathetic increase that has happened in the post-COVID. So I think, to sum up this part, employment security is very important. And because when I talked about economic access, what does it mean? There has to be some income, adequate income. And not only has there to be income on 1 month or 1 day or during the harvest season, but you need that income stability throughout the year. Because if you remember, food security is not 1 day that you will eat and then some days when there is no employment, you won't eat. I know that happens, but we want everybody to have adequate food every day of the year. So this income stability, we are very far from income stability, both in terms of the level of income, the high levels of poverty. I think we all know there are high levels of poverty, but we don't have any data. The last survey was 2017-18, but the Modi government hid the data. It said the data are bad. And the statisticians, those working in the officers, are very upset because it shows that they collected bad quality data. But actually they were hiding the truth. So we only know in 2011-12, 10 years ago, in the UPA government period, that's when we have our income statistics on poverty. And they have stopped collecting data on consumer expenditure. And the next survey, they say, will be in 24 after the election. So just like Census of India, the income expenditure survey will also only come after the general elections. So I think one of the things that I think all of you who are working on the ground is to collect in some way and publicize or put out data in whatever form is possible on the extent of rural poverty, on the extent of poverty of agricultural worker households. Employment has fallen, wage rates have fallen, clearly incomes could not have risen. But we don't have that data, and if we can collect it through the organization like this, I think that will bring truth to the front, and that will bring the evidence in the eyes of people throughout the country. Now, along with income, very important feature for access to food is obviously prices. You may have income, but if the food is unaffordable because of inflation. Now, this is again something I think all of you are aware of, that we have very high rates of food inflation. We have overall high rate of inflation, but the biggest component of that is food inflation. This morning, coming here in the newspaper, I saw that in January 2022, over last January 2021, the price of cereals increased at 16%, 1/6. So that is, if you were earning 100 rupees, you need to earn 116 to buy the same amount of food. Now, last year, the women's wage went up by exactly 16 rupees. That means barely what you could buy last year or could not buy is what you can afford. The food index, that is the cost of food, is the most important component of the retail price index in rural areas. And that's because a large part of the income of the workers goes on food. And which were the commodities which have shown in the last few months? Cereals, protein like eggs, as you know, egg price is going up. Milk, price of milk has risen, started in COVID and is continuing to rise. When did I start? So milk, meat prices. So I started with, how long are people just going to have dal chawal or roti, sukhi roti? When are we going to diversify the diet? And all the items with which you can diversify your diet, your dals, your milk, your eggs, meat, all these and cereals have shown the fastest increase in prices. And Professor Ramkumar had written how during COVID, because of the increased distribution through the ration system, at least rice and wheat was reaching people. But many other commodities like milk, meat, they not only were not available, but the prices were shooting up. So, I mean, the farmers were not getting the prices. The farmers were destroying the produce because of the no trucks and no supply chain. But the consumers, the buyers, had to face very high price increase. So I think with this level of inflation, the kind of wage rates we are seeing is just not adequate even to buy the minimum diet, let alone to buy a healthy diet. So I think when we talk about food security, there's a struggle against food price inflation also. And of course, as many of you know, the public distribution system, the PDS, one of the very important role it plays, it's not just giving 5 kilos or 10 kilos to a household. It is taking food grain from where it is grown to other parts. And through this process, it has a very important influence on market prices. So the fact that price of cereal fell sharply through the 70s, 80s in India is not just because production went up, but because this production could be distributed to different parts of the country and used to control prices in different parts of the country. So I think today it's very important to talk about how commodities which are not in the PDS, how we can go for controlling the inflation, controlling the prices. Now here again, I would like to mention that the state with the lowest retail price inflation during COVID and in the last month is Kerala. So again, it is thanks to the diversification of products being sold in the Maveli stores, being sold in the fair price shops, in the controlled price shops. So it's not, I think today I want to say that we have to demand that the rice and wheat allocation that was removed is brought back. But I think we have to demand more. We have to demand more commodities, not just in the ration shops, but in fair price shops of different kinds, consumer fed, mark fed, different types of shops, cooperatives where prices are controlled. If the Kirana store in the village sells everything at a high price, then the agricultural worker is helpless. Doesn't matter what wage he has earned that day, he will be charged a high price and not be able to buy a nutritious diet. So I think when we talk about food security, employment security for income, higher wages, more days of employment, stability in incomes, control over food prices is as important as talking about what has happened to the PDS itself. The last point I want to make is that when we talk about safety and quality of food, we talk about nutrition, then access to water, sanitation, all these are very important. And if you look at the official statistics, almost all of India is open defecation free now. But if you actually go to the villages, most recently we were in a village in Nagapatnam, 30% or so of households are not using their toilets, they're defecating in the open, and majority of these are Dalit worker households where they live, the area is so congested that if there is not enough water, then they cannot even construct a toilet, let alone use it. So I think when we talk about food security, clean water, toilets, sanitation, this is also has to be in our domain of thinking. And again, the last point I would like to make perhaps is that worldwide there is a shift now. Instead of talking about food security, people are talking about food and nutrition security. And for all ages, starting with infants, starting with children in ICDS, in schools, so in adolescents, particularly young women, then mothers, pregnant women, adults, workers. So I think that we have to really start demanding or start thinking or making people aware that it's not just a question of getting adequate cereals, but how do we ensure adequate nutrition? Because I think I'll end with this, that it's very, very sad that when we are celebrating 75 years and Amrit Kal for 800 million people in India, they don't have a healthy diet. It's far from any kind of Amrit for them. So thank you, comrades, for inviting me here today. And I hope that through your struggles, we will see some improvements and changes in the food security situation. Thank you.
So, thank you, Comrade Nadira Swaminathan, for your speech. And now, this canvas picture will be handed over to her. All our guests now we are distributing it. I think Comrade Swapna Bhattacharya. Is he here? Is he here? He's here. Yeah. So, our next speaker is Comrade Ramakumar. So, before speaking, we are distributing the canvas picture to Comrade Ramakumar by Comrade Samir Saha. Samir Saha. Where is he? Has he left? Is he there? Yeah. Then Comrade Bigash Ranjan Bhattacharya, he is also with us, and Comrade Sabiruddin Mullah. He will present the. Is he here? No. So I think one more presentation of the canvas picture, that is to Comrade A. Vijayaraghavan, since he is residing this. That is by Comrade Santosh Adhikari.
He is the AIW president of this.
Oh, he is the president of All India Agriculture Workers Union in Howrah district. So a clap for him. Thank you. So now I invite Comrade Ramakumar to deliver his speech. Thank you.
Comrade Vijayaraghavan, senior leaders of the movement on the dais, comrades, delegates, friends. Let me begin by thanking the All India Agricultural Workers Union for inviting me to speak on this seminar. I have about 30 minutes to speak, I suppose, and I have chosen a topic which must be close to the All India Agricultural Workers movement and its overall political agenda, which is the question of land and its distribution in India. As we all know, the question of land has always been considered by our movement as the national question in India's developmental trajectory. The question of land has never been treated as one of economic importance alone. We've always recognized that the question of land has an economic dimension, has a social dimension, has also a political dimension. The distribution of land, the monopolization of land in the rural areas leads not only to economic inequality, higher poverty and so on, but it also acts as the material basis for caste discrimination and different other forms of social discriminations to persist and grow in the Indian countryside. The monopoly of land with the upper caste groups and upper class groups also spills over into the political sphere by creating a political system which is biased towards the bourgeois landlord political parties. Elections are rigged in their favor. They use their money power and muscle power, which again is derived from their monopoly over land ownership, to gain hegemony in elections and other political activities. So land is a multifaceted issue which affects rural development, and certainly one that comrades in the All India Agricultural Workers Union must be clearly worried about. The story of land reform in India is also well known. The story of land reform in India is one of complete failure. Betrayal of the freedom movement's slogans, betrayal of the masses which participated in the freedom movement, which dreamed of an India free of inequality, free of monopoly, or free of landlords, free of caste-based discrimination and so on. If you look at the history of India after independence, they take the last 60 or 70 years, Only about 50 lakh acres have been taken over by the state and redistributed as part of land reform initiatives. And a large part of this distribution of land as part of land reform is in this state, West Bengal. Kerala, Tripura, and something in Jammu Kashmir and so on are other participants in the story. If you look at the total area distributed, only about 2% of the total area has been redistributed as part of any land reform activity. If you look at tenants, what share of tenants in India have received some kind of security of tenure, you will see that only 4% of tenants in India have received any form of security of tenure over the last 60 to 70 years. If you take a small number, 25 acres per household, if you take 25 acres per household, and if you had calculated the total amount of ceiling surplus land that would have been available in 1963 in India, the number is 6 crore acres. 6 crore acres would have been available in India for redistribution if a 25-acre ceiling was set in 1963 and all ceiling surplus land was taken over by the government and redistributed. But how much was distributed? Instead of 6 crore acres, only 50 lakh acres has been redistributed over the last 70 years. That is why, comrades, it's very important to understand that the failure of land reform in India has not just had economic implications, but also very powerful social and political implications as well. The continuation of caste discrimination in different parts of India, the denial of basic freedoms for Dalits and Adivasis in Indian villages, to walk certain roads, to use certain wells, to use certain toilets, all these, where does all this discrimination come from? The basic material basis of this discrimination comes from the monopoly over land ownership that upper caste and upper classes in Indian villages have enjoyed, thanks to the benefits given to them by the bourgeois landlord regime in India. This is a basic political fact in India, which we must grasp as Marxists living in the contemporary period. If we do not understand this basic fact of rural India, we miss the slogan of land reform. We miss the very category in Marxism of class struggle. If we miss the basic category of class struggle in the Indian villages, then we basically lose direction as a left movement. There is nothing that will differentiate the left movement from left romanticists who are roaming around all over the world. That is the difference between left movement with a Marxist persuasion like ours and economic romanticists of the left variety around us. That grasping the difference, in my view, comrades, is very important. So, this doesn't mean, however, that in the last 60 to 70 years, everything has been static in the countryside. No. Things have changed. There has been a green revolution. The country has attained food self-sufficiency. There has been a growth of commercialization, a growth of markets. There has been eviction of tenants, and increasing monopolization of land has taken place within not the old landlords, but those who have gained substantially through an increase of incomes during Green Revolution, increase of production, productivity, etc., and have transformed themselves like the German Junkers from landlords of the yesteryears to capitalist landlords of the today's era, or landlord capitalists of today's era. That transformation has also taken place alongside. There has been a growth of proletarianization in the countryside. The number of people, the share of people who participate in manual labor in villages, who have been separated from the means of production, which is land, has grown over the years. There has been increasing proletarianization. There has also been increasing private investment. These landlords and landlord capitalists have invested substantially in farmhouses, in tractors, in tube wells, bore wells, etc., and substantially accumulated agrarian capital in the countryside. And what have they done? What have they done with this agrarian capital? A part of it has been reinvested into agriculture, but a part of it has also been reinvested in non-agricultural areas. They own cinema halls in the nearby urban area. They own shopping malls in the nearby urban areas. They own schools, colleges in the nearby urban areas. Thereby, they have further accumulated capital using agrarian capital as the foundational base of their economic activity. This has increased rural inequality substantially in the last few years. It is a myth that is spread by economic romanticists of the left variety. There is now only a dichotomy between rural and urban. Is there a dichotomy between rural as a homogeneous category and urban as a homogeneous category? It is complete falsehood and myth that is spread. Rural is differentiated. Rural is a heterogeneous category. Rural is not a homogeneous category. If we miss this basic fact of Indian villages, then there is no class struggle possible in Indian villages. If the rural area is homogeneous, what is class struggle? Rural versus urban is not class struggle. If you believe in land struggle, in the idea of class, then we must recognize that the rural area is a differentiated, heterogeneous category. And the inequality within rural areas has substantially grown over the years, founded on agrarian capital of the post-Green Revolution period and the lack of land reform in the countryside. And this increase in inequality has created new contradictions in the heterogeneity of the rural areas. It is a basic, concrete situation that we obtain in Indian villages today, even in the era of globalization and imperialism. This, comrades, is a very important starting point for what I'm going to say from here on. These sections have also substantially benefited from state support in the post-Green Revolution period, as we all know. Price support, credit support, subsidy support, marketing support, or the availability of high-yielding varieties, all these have benefited the landed sections only. So this is the reality of India that we see between around 1947 to about 1990 or 1991. What is the situation as a result? Lack of land reform on the one side, growth of agrarian capitalism on the other side, increasing proletarianization, landlessness, etc., accumulation of agrarian capital on the other side. What is the basic outcome of all this that we obtain today? 40 to 50%, according to data that you use. If you take NSSO, you will get one result. If you take National Family Health Survey, you will get another number. But ultimately, you will see that about 42 to 45% of households in rural India today are landless. When 40 to 45% of rural India are landless, how can you categorize a rural area as homogeneous? How can you categorize the rural area as a category which can be united against the urban capitalist or the industrial capitalist? What happens to, are the interests, are the economic interests, are the class interests of the 40 to 45% of the rural population the same as the remaining 50 to 55%? Hardly. And this means that you have enormous amount of land. Some states have huge amounts of landlessness. Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, you will see 52 to 54% landlessness. In Punjab, you will see 49 to 50% landlessness. Some states have very high levels of landlessness compared to other states. So this is also a regionally varied phenomenon that we very clearly understand. This has also increased to huge inequality. The Foundation for Agrarian Studies, whose members are participating here as fraternal delegates, will tell you that if you take villages in India, they have surveyed 22 villages in different parts of India. What did they find? They took a census of the village, then they arranged them in the ascending or descending order. They found how much land and assets do the top 5% own. They checked. They found invariably the top 5% of Indian villages, top 5% of households, they own close to 30 to 40% of land and other assets in the village. Take the bottom 50%, top 5%, bottom 50%. The bottom 50% in most of the villages that they surveyed own 0% of land and assets. In fact, in other words, the extent of landlessness that you see in those villages is more than 50%. This is the reality of rural inequality in India. I'm going to say it again and again in the remaining time. The rural area is not a homogeneous area. The rural society is not a homogeneous society. The rural society is a heterogeneous society, materially differentiated into different classes. And our interests cannot lie with all the classes at the same time. Our interest can only lie with the toiling masses. Our interest must always lie with the masses who labor in the soil, who actually work and not exploit others. And that is a key differentiation that we must keep in mind. Take, for example, the ceiling surplus land that we have. Is the slogan of land reform dead in India? Take the ceiling surplus land data. If you look at the total area that is declared as surplus in India, it is about 68 lakh acres. Now, in the 68 lakh acres which has been declared as surplus, only 61 lakh acres have been taken over by the government. And out of the 61 lakh acres which have been taken over by the government, only 51 lakh acres has been distributed to different sections of the rural society. In other words, you will clearly see that 7 lakh acres is yet to be taken over by the government, and 10 lakh acres have been taken over by the government but has not yet been redistributed to the landless sections of the society across the country. That means in total, about 17 lakh acres is the extent of land that we have in rural India, which is either declared surplus but not taken over, or has been taken over but not distributed. 7 plus 10, 17 lakh acres. Now, where are these 17 lakh acres? Don't we need to find out where these 17 lakh acres are? Is that not where our struggle must lie, in identifying the 17 lakh acres? Let's say at least 17 lakh acres, some of it is lost. But let's say at least 5 to 10 lakh acres will be available for redistribution. Is that not a substantial amount of area for a country like India, for a nationwide agitation for land reform and land distribution? That is a number that I place before you, comrades, for your consideration in your political activities. Take, for example, the Forest Rights Act. The Kisan Sabha has been waging substantial amount of struggles across the country for implementation of the Forest Rights Act. 44 lakh claims have been presented before the government across the country. Out of that 44 acres, only out of that 44 lakh claims, only 22 lakh claims have been accepted by the government. 22 lakh claims are yet to be considered by the government, and up to 4 acres of land can be distributed to each household under this provisions of this act. So there lies another 22 lakh claims to be taken consideration of. Land reform is not just this, there is also more. There is a huge program of government wasteland distribution. How much is the cultivable wasteland in India? If you see, there is about 1.2 crore hectares of cultivable wastelands in India. 1.2 crore hectares of cultivable wasteland in India, of which 60 lakh hectares has been taken over and redistributed. In other words, another 60 lakh hectares is remaining as government wasteland, cultivable wasteland, which is yet to be redistributed by the government to the landless. The funny thing here is, a lot of this 60 lakh acres is considered by the government as not suitable for redistribution, but for gifting to industries, special economic zones, etc. in the current era. Instead of redistributing it to the landless sections of the society, this 60 lakh acres of wasteland is being used by the government for helping industry, for helping special economic zones, for giving over to residential housing areas, and so on and so forth. That's another 60 lakh hectares, not acres, hectares lying there. Then let's come to Bhudan land. Comrades from Bihar, comrades from Maharashtra, comrades from states like Odisha, and all will remember the great history of Bhudan. However, our movement disagreed with that activity pattern of the Bhudan agitation. There was about 22 lakh acres notified under Bhudan. 22 lakh acres notified as Bhudan, of which government data shows only 16 lakh acres have been redistributed till now. Another 5 lakh acres of Bhudan land is lying there, notified by the government as Bhudan land, but not yet redistributed. Should not our movement go into the fields and identify that land? Are not modern GPS technologies available today to mark the lat long of each plot of land and put it on a website? Consider all the Agricultural Workers Union just asks its workers, wherever you find Bhudan land in your village, please measure the latitude and longitude of it and let's put it in the website of the All India Agricultural Workers Union at the national level. What kind of boost it will give to the land movement in India? Is this not possible? But the question is, comrades, who is opposing this? Why is this not happening? Why is it that 60 lakh hectares of government wasteland? Why is it that 5 lakh acres of Bhudan land? I'll go further and say there is also another category called common land. Common land or pastures or whatever we call it. In Hindi, you can call it charai zameen. Right? This wasteland is another category where 1 crore acres are there across India. And this 1 crore acres also can be used for the important demand of the Ambedkarite land movement in India has been not to consider these pastures and wastelands as common property resources, which essentially would benefit the village landlords, but instead to use it for redistribution to the landless Dalits in the same village. But comrades, you add it up. Who is opposing this land distribution in villages? Who opposes redistribution of Bhudan land in villages? Who opposes distribution of, comrades from Maharashtra will be here, Gairan land in Maharashtra villages? Who opposes the redistribution of Gairan land in Maharashtra villages, which is nobody's land? Why should anybody protest in the village the redistribution of wasteland or Bhudan land? Because the landlords in the villages or the large capitalist landlords in the villages have taken over such common land, have taken over the Bhudan land, have taken over the wasteland and are using it for their own private profiteering purposes. They also see that if the Dalit households or the Adivasi households in the village get ownership rights over this wasteland or Gairan land or pasture land or whatever, their social status will improve in the village. Their dependence on the landlord capitalist sections will decline and their power, social, economic and political in the village will decline. Is that not an aspect of class struggle, comrades, that we must be taking note of? Does this stand as evidence of homogeneity of the village society? Is this not a classic evidence of heterogeneity in village societies? Who is opposing MGNREGS in Indian villages? The large farmer sections are opposing MGNREGS in Indian villages because a spread of MGNREGS in Indian villages would mean less laborers available to their farms and an increase in wages that they may have to pay in a tighter labor market. Similarly, who is opposing Forest Rights Act? The local landlords. So the key point that we have to note, comrades, is that, I'm going to say it again and again till I finish, the rural society must be seen as a class differentiated society. And land is a very important component of economic, social and political power in Indian villages that our movement, which is wedded to the ideology of class struggle, cannot simply forget. And that's a key point that I would like to make. Then comes liberalization. Liberalization has introduced new complications. Liberalization has introduced new topics, new slogans into the land question. It has certainly complicated the land question in India, no doubt about it. Liberalization is not something that we can simply ignore. It has substantially changed the land question. How? With the coming in of liberalization, you have 2-3 things happening. One, in agriculture, the government started arguing that we need to encourage corporate farming. We need to encourage contract farming, etc. So we must diversify away from rice, wheat, etc. to high-value fruits, vegetables, etc. Which means that fruits, vegetables must be exported. They are export-oriented crops. And so you need economies of scale to be harvested in these crops, which means that you need to allow people to cultivate 400 acres, 500 acres of fruits and vegetables in large extents of in large plots. But if you want to allow corporate farming or contract farming of this type, there is a substantial obstacle, legal obstacle in front of you, which is the land reform law. The land reform law says you cannot own or possess beyond 50 acres or 40 acres or 30 acres, depending on the state land reform laws. So if you want to encourage corporate farming or contract farming, the land reform laws must be amended. It is a necessity. So number one attack on land reform laws during the period of liberalization was because of the perceived need to spread or encourage contract farming or corporate farming, number one. But not just that. There was also the need for land for industries, special economic zones, residential zones, gated communities, etc., which came up during this time. Now, this is also a problem because if this activity is spreading to rural areas, the land reform laws or the revenue laws of different states have continued to be bigger obstacles. Why? In many villages of India, in many states of India, village land cannot be bought by non-agriculturists. Non-agriculturists cannot buy rural land. That is why Sachin Tendulkar or Amitabh Bachchan write farmer as their occupation when they go and buy land for their farmhouses. Because you have to be a farmer. So you will say, my pardada, my grandfather, great-grandfather was a farmer, and so they'll somehow pay the tehsildar a few thousand rupees and get a certificate that they are also a farmer. That's because there is a law which says non-agriculturists cannot buy rural land in many states. Many states have it. That is another obstacle. Yet another obstacle is, all these are non-agricultural activities. In many states, land reform laws are very strict in saying that this land can be used only for agricultural activities and not for non-agricultural activities. So it means the shift from agricultural to non-agricultural purpose is restricted by land reform laws. So you need corporate farming, you need contract farming, you need to give land to industry. That means you need to change the character from agricultural to non-agricultural. You need to give them land. That means you also have to allow them to buy and purchase land as non-agriculturalists. What are all these people attacking? What is the attack on? The land reform laws. What is the casualty here? Land reform laws. All ceiling surplus legislations, that means, have been sought to be amended. Land reform laws have been sought to be weakened, and all these new non-agricultural activities have been allowed to be performed without any obstruction across the country. This is how the land acquisition legislation comes into the picture. You had an 1894 legislation from the colonial period, which essentially said you can actually pay 30% of the market price of land, and the government, using the eminent domain principle, can take over land at any time. There was no social impact assessment. Consent of people was not required. The state can decide what is public purpose and take over any amount of land anytime. This changed in 2013 when our movement and other land movements which were working on land rights struggled hard for a new legislation, and that's how the 2013 land acquisition law was passed by the Parliament of India. What did this say? It said that 70% of people should say yes, or in some cases up to 80% of people should say yes in a Grama Sabha before you take over land. 2 to 4 times in rural and urban and rural areas respectively, 2 to 4 times the market value of land must be paid as compensation. There must be rehabilitation and resettlement as an additional condition. There must be a social impact assessment. All these things came into the picture in 2013. Was this some revolutionary legislation? No. The 2013 legislation kept about 13 legislations, for example, the National Highways Act, etc., out of its ambit. It only covered the rest. But still it was good because it was a substantial change over the 1894 legislation. Now, then what happened? Narendra Modi came to power in 2014. He comes with the experience of Gujarat. Gujarat was the first state in India to almost completely amend its land reform legislation to give away land to anybody, anytime, for any purpose. Substantial sections of the Gujarat rural population are landless. Modi diverted land during his chief ministership to all forms of industrial and non-agricultural activities. He amended land reform laws substantially to change who can buy agricultural land, to what purpose can agricultural land be put. All these things Modi changed. So here was a model, the Gujarat model of weakening land reform laws, which was now available. Using that template, what did he do? He brought in an ordinance in 2015. We fought tooth and nail against that ordinance. Comrade Hanan is here, who was a leader of the new alliance which was built at that time under our leadership to fight the ordinance, and we were able to defeat it in the parliament. That was a great success of our agricultural movement, the Kisan Sabha and the agricultural workers movement in 2015. The first defeat of the Modi government in rural India was that. The farm laws comes second. But what happened here? Okay, that story got over. But did capitalism sit and watch? No. What did they do? They went to the states. If national legislation is not possible, we will sabotage it in the state level. What do they do? There is a clause in the land acquisition legislation, I forget the clause number now, which says that states can bring about their own legislations which can amend some of these principles. What did they do? They brought in the urgency clause, that is the urgency of land acquisition, if it is required, was widened to include rural infrastructure, industrial corridor, infrastructure development, etc. All these were newly allowed in that ordinance. Instead of, now that ordinance had failed, but different states were persuaded, encouraged to pass amendments in their own assemblies after 2015, where they amended their land reform laws and, comrades, verbatim, copy-pasted the clauses of the 2015 failed ordinance into state assembly legislations, and they passed it in the state assemblies. In other words, land reform laws were substantially amended at the state level after 2015 to allow for uninhibited takeover of land for corporate interests. But the point is, these two are not separate issues. The point is that the question of land that we have tried to describe till now in the context of heterogeneity of the rural society on the one hand, and the question of land acquisition that we are discussing now are not separate topics. One is not the old land question, the other is not the new land question. It is the same land question because both of them are attacking the same legislation. Only one legislation is being attacked, which is the land reform laws. So it's not old or new. It is still the same land question that is on the table in front of us. How do we fight the land acquisition which is taking freely being done by corporates? We protect the land reform law. It is only by protecting the land reform law in states that we can stop uninhibited land acquisition. But what does that do? That means we are also standing firm with the agenda of land reform. We are standing firm with the need to redistribute land in the villages as per that legislation that we are trying to bring back. So this artificial distinction between an old agrarian question and a new agrarian question is complete nonsense. The new and old agrarian questions are substantially, fundamentally linked to the land reform legislations that we have at the state level. That is what everybody is attacking. So to undertake land reform, to redistribute land in the rural areas, to protect farmers from land acquisition, there is only one thing to do. We have to protect the land reform laws. So this important agenda, comrades, I think is a very important agenda in front of our movement. This important agenda that we have before us to take forward the land question, to consider class struggle as the foundational tool that we have, our movement has in rural India today. This is a very important question that I wanted to place before you. I did not want to intersperse Hindi and English because time would have been a casualty, but now my watch shows that I have 3 minutes more, and in these 3 minutes I will try to summarize it in Hindi. It's very difficult for me. साथियों, भारत के विकास की चरित्र हम देखेंगे तो भूमि का जो सवाल है, जमीन का जो सवाल है, वो एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण राष्ट्रीय प्रश्न है हमारे सामने। इस महत्वपूर्ण राष्ट्रीय प्रश्न का आर्थिक पहलू है, सामाजिक पहलू है और राजनीतिक पहलू है। इस अंडरस्टैंडिंग से हमने ये भूमि सुधार का कानून है उसको हमने देखा है 1950 की भारत के स्वतंत्रता के बाद। लेकिन भूमि सुधार का कानून जो है हमारे देश में पूरी तरह जमींदार वर्ग ने पूरी तरह से उसको खत्म कर दिया। अगर आप देखेंगे 6 करोड़ एकड़ अगर भारत के किसानों को हम दे सकते थे पिछले 70 साल में, हम सिर्फ 50 लाख एकड़ हमारे किसानों को आज तक दे पाए हैं भूमि सुधार कानूनों के अंदर। उन कानूनों के अंदर सबसे महत्वपूर्ण काम पश्चिम बंगाल ने किया है, जहां से 50% से ज्यादा, पूरे भारत के 50% से ज्यादा भूमि का वितरण जो है इस राज्य में हुआ। तो मुझे बहुत गर्व है कि मैं ऐसी एक राज्य में बैठ के इस बारे में बात कर रहा हूं। तो ये जो बात है, इस माहौल में हम देखेंगे इसको कि किस तरह का बदलाव आया है आज भारत में, क्योंकि भूमि सुधार का कानून ठीक से लागू नहीं हुआ है। आज भारत के गांवों में 40 से 45% तक परिवार जो हैं उनके पास जमीन नहीं है। अगर हम गांव में जाके सर्वे करते हैं तो हमको पता चलता है कि ऊपर का जो 5% परिवार जो है गांव का, उनके पास पूरे गांव का 30 से 40% जमीन उनके कब्जे में है, और नीचे से 50% को हम देखेंगे परिवारों को, उनके पास 0% जमीन है, यानी कि उनके पास कुछ भी जमीन नहीं है। यह हमको बताता है कि भारत का गांव जो है उसके अंदर जो परिवारें रहती हैं उनके अंदर बहुत बड़ी तरह से वर्गीकरण का जो मुद्दा है आज लागू है, आज भी लागू है। वर्गीकरण का मुद्दा इसलिए क्योंकि वहां पे अभी भी बड़े किसान हैं, छोटे किसान हैं, अभी भी वहां पे 40% परिवार जो है उनके पास जमीन नहीं है। तो वर्ग संघर्ष का नारा जो है, मैं अपने बात में ये कहना चाहता था कि वो कुछ स्थगित करने वाला मुद्दा नहीं है, बल्कि आज का सबसे महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दों में से एक ग्रामीण इलाकों में जमीन का मुद्दा आज भी जिंदा है। ये क्योंकि हमारा मूवमेंट जो है वर्ग संघर्ष के नारे को साथ में लेके चलता है, तो ये जो बात है, ये जो ग्रामीण इलाकों का ये जो वर्गीकरण की जो बात है, ये हमें अच्छी तरह से समझने की जरूरत है। तभी हम भूमि के प्रश्न को, जमीन के प्रश्न को ठीक तरह से समझ सकते हैं और ठीक तरह से हमारा जो मुद्दा है हम आगे रख सकते हैं। ये मैं एक बात अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में कहना चाहता था। और दूसरी बात मैं ये कहना चाहता था कि अगर आप सोचेंगे कि आज भूमि का जो पुनर्वितरण का जो मामला है वो हो सकता है, ये सवाल बहुत सारे लोगों के मन में आ सकता है। तो सरकार के आंकड़े ये दिखाता है कि सीलिंग सरप्लस लैंड जो हम बोलते हैं, ये जो सीलिंग सरप्लस लैंड आज भी 17 लाख एकड़ जमीन हमारे देश में अभी भी ऐसा है, जो सीलिंग सरप्लस सरकार ने मान लिया है, लेकिन सरकार ने आज तक उसको अपने कब्जे में नहीं लिया है, या सरकार ने कब्जे में लिया है लेकिन उसका वितरण नहीं किया। तो ये एक मुद्दा हमारे सामने है 17 लाख एकड़ का। दूसरा क्या है, फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट, आदिवासी इलाकों में फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट का, वनाधिकार कानून का जो मामला है, वहां पे हम लोग देखेंगे तो 45 लाख क्लेम एप्लीकेशन जो है किसानों और आदिवासी किसानों ने रखी है, उसमें सिर्फ 22 लाख एप्लीकेशन सरकार ने मंजूर की है। यानी कि 22 लाख एप्लीकेशन वहां पे अभी भी है जो सरकार ने रिजेक्ट कर दी है। तीसरी बात, हमारे गांव में बहुत सारे वेस्टलैंड है, चराई जमीन है। वो चराई जमीन कितना है अगर आप देखेंगे तो 60 लाख हेक्टर, 60 लाख हेक्टर जमीन आज भी भारत में है जो चराई जमीन है, जहां पे कृषि हो सकती है। वो किसानों को जमीन, बिना जमीन वाले परिवारों को दे सकते हैं, लेकिन वो सरकारें नहीं दे रही है। और भूदान का जो लैंड है, भूदान का जो जमीन है, 22 लाख एकड़ भूदान के तौर पे हमारे सरकारों के पास है, लेकिन सिर्फ 16 लाख एकड़ का वितरण हुआ है। बाकी 5 लाख एकड़ अभी भी है जिसका वितरण बाकी है। इस 5 लाख एकड़ में सबसे ज्यादा 2 लाख बिहार में है, बाकी 1 लाख आंध्र प्रदेश और तेलंगाना में है, और करीबन 75,000 एकड़ महाराष्ट्र जैसे राज्यों में है। तो इस तरह के बहुत सारे जमीन सरकारी आंकड़े हमें बताते हैं कि अभी भी हैं, जिसके ऊपर आंदोलन हो सकता है, जिसके ऊपर ये पूरा जमीन जो है इसके पुनर्वितरण का मुद्दा आगे रख के एक नेशनल मूवमेंट जो है हम शुरू कर सकते हैं। इसका भी इसकी भी बात मैंने अपने प्रेजेंटेशन में रखने की कोशिश की। आखिरी बात मैंने ये रखने की कोशिश की कि हमारे देश में नव उदारवाद नीतियों के आने के बाद भूमि अधिग्रहण का एक जो मुद्दा है वो सबसे महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दा बन के आगे आया है। ये भूमि अधिग्रहण का मुद्दा जो है अलग अलग की वजह से आया है। कुछ फार्मिंग या कॉन्ट्रैक्ट फार्मिंग की वजह से आया है, कुछ जगह पे व्यावसायिक उपयोग के लिए जो भूमि, इंडस्ट्री के लिए जो भूमि है उसके लिए आया है, कहीं पे भी स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन का मुद्दा है, कहीं और लोगों के रहने का घर जो है रेजिडेंशियल हाउसेस कॉलोनी उसके लिए आया है। ऐसे बहुत सारे मुद्दे हैं, लेकिन ये सब करने में सरकार के सामने जो मुश्किलें थी वो क्या थी? भूमि सुधार की कानूनें। भूमि सुधारों की कानूनों के अनुसार एक परिवार 25 एकड़, 30 एकड़, 40 एकड़, 50 एकड़ से ज्यादा नहीं रख सकता, तो उसके वजह से ये सब काम मुश्किल में आ गया। तो सभी सरकारें जो है जो इसको ओवरकम करना चाहती थी, तो वो लोग भूमि सुधार का कानून जो है उसमें अमेंडमेंट लाके उसमें बदलाव लाके ये भूमि अधिग्रहण ज्यादा मुश्किल न हो, ऐसा एक माहौल बनाने की कोशिश सरकारों ने नव उदारवाद नीतियों के आने के बाद की है। इसके साथ एक दो तीन और मुद्दे हैं। गांवों में सिर्फ किसान लोग भूमि खरीद सकते हैं, जमीन खरीद सकते हैं, ये भी कानून में है। दूसरी बात, कृषि का जो जमीन है वो कृषि इतर उपयोग के लिए ले सकते हैं, उसके ऊपर प्रतिबंध है भूमि सुधार के कानून में। तो ये सब सरकारों को हटाना था ताकि इंडस्ट्री को या बाकी अधिग्रहण के काम के लिए जमीन आसानी से मिल सके। तो इन्होंने क्या किया? हाँ, सभी राज्यों में भूमि सुधारों के कानून हैं, उनको और उसको अमेंड किया। बहुत सारे जो सीलिंग सरप्लस कितना रह सकता है, जो अगर आपको इंडस्ट्री अगर किसी राज्य में अगर लानी है तो ये सीलिंग सरप्लस का मुद्दा जो है आपके लिए एप्लीकेबल नहीं होगा। ऐसे बहुत सारे अमेंडमेंट हुए। कोई भी जमीन खरीद सकता है, किसान होने की जरूरत नहीं है गांव में। और कृषि का जमीन जो है कृषि इतर काम के लिए भी उसका उपयोग हो सकता है। ऐसे भी अमेंडमेंट कई राज्यों ने की है। तो ये सब मुद्दे जो हैं, ये इसलिए मैं इसको साथ में इधर ला रहा था, क्योंकि अगर हम भूमि अधिग्रहण के खिलाफ लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं, अगर हम 2013 का जो कानून है उसके लागू होने के लिए हम आंदोलन कर रहे हैं, तो आंदोलन का मुद्दा क्या है कि भूमि सुधार के कानून को पुराना जो उसका स्तर है वहां पे उसको वापस लेके जाएगा। तो ये जो मुद्दा है, नया मुद्दा जो नव उदारवाद नीतियों के समय पे आया है, ये भी भूमि सुधार से जुड़ा हुआ ही एक मुद्दा है। तो मैं ये बोलना चाहता था कि मेरे भाषण में कि ये जो भूमि सुधार का मुद्दा है, ये वर्ग संघर्ष का नारा जो है, स्थगित करने वाला एक नारा नहीं है, मुद्दा नहीं है। आज भारत में अभी भी बहुत सारे जमीन ऐसे हैं जिसका पुनर्वितरण हो सकता है, और वो एक आंदोलन के रूप में हमको आगे लाने की जरूरत है। ये बात मैं अपने भाषण में रखना चाहता था। बहुत शुक्रिया दोस्तों, समय ज्यादा ले लिया तो मुझे माफ कर देना। लाल सलाम।
सो कॉमरेड राम कुमार की भाषण की बात हमारे सामने कॉमरेड विकास रंजन भट्टाचार्य है। वो हमारा ऑल इंडिया लॉयर्स यूनियन की प्रेसिडेंट है, और नाउ आई इनवाइट कॉमरेड विकास रंजन भट्टाचार्य टू डिलीवर हिज स्पीच।
नमस्कार कॉमरेड्स, आई एम श्योर आप सब लोग थके हुए हैं। इतने सारे भाषण के बाद फिर आगे किसको उठा लिया आप? तो मेरा इशू है कि आज के संविधान, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इज अंडर अटैक। भाई ये संविधान क्या चीज है? इसके खिलाफ इतना आवाज क्यों उठा रहा है सब आदमी? ये तो भालू नहीं है, ये तो शेर भी नहीं है, तो इसका खिलाफ इतना आवाज कहाँ उठा रहे हो? I will try to explain to you. I am not a good speaker in Hindi. I will try to explain to you in my own way, giving Hindi versions in between. The Constitution was a great achievement of freedom struggle. Unless we appreciate the Indian freedom struggle and its diversity in the struggle, ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कैसे मिला, क्यों मिला, ये क्या बताया, इसका क्या ढंग है, इसका क्या सोच है, हम नहीं समझ पाएंगे। Indian people fought against British imperialists. They had ruled over us more than 200 years. Before that, there are all Sultanites, Mughal, सब सारे आदमी जहां से आए ये शासन किया। लेकिन ब्रिटिश जब आए, उनका एक ही मकसद था, उन्होंने यहां पर आए थे व्यवसाय के लिए। ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी वो भारत में पैर रखे थे कि यहां पर ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेस बहुत अच्छा है, नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज बहुत अच्छा है। इसको लूट करने के लिए, शोषण करने के लिए they came to India and gradually they acquired the ruling reign. धीरे धीरे वो अपने शासन कायम कर लिया। इसके खिलाफ लड़ाई शुरू हुआ था। पहले लड़ाई सक्सेसफुल जो स्ट्रगल हुआ था वो हुआ था किसानों का लड़ा। The सिपाही म्यूटिनी was in fact the rebellion of Kishans. And that was the beginning. And ultimately, the struggle spread. Mahatma Gandhi came into the field. He wanted to unite all the forms of struggle to a united form of freedom struggle. I will not take much of your time. I will just give you some historical incident. Prime Minister Attlee was the Labour Prime Minister when India was declared to be independent by transfer of power. हमने क्षमता छीन नहीं लिया, क्षमता हस्तांतर हुआ। कानून के तरीके से हस्तांतर के बाद हमको ये न्यू गवर्नमेंट का चलाने का मकसद मिला था। तो उनसे पूछा गया था, हमारा कलकत्ता का चीफ जस्टिस थे, उन्हें पूछा एटली को, अच्छा साहब आप तो बता रहे थे, चार्चिल साहब ने बता रहे थे कि किसके लिए इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस हम देंगे, जितना भी हम वहां रहेंगे जितना भी हम एक्सप्लॉइट करेंगे, किसानों से एक्सप्लॉइट करेंगे, श्रमिकों से एक्सप्लॉइट करेंगे, मुनाफा होगा, हम नहीं छोड़ेंगे। Then what did prompt you to declare that India would be an independent country? He said that not only the Satyagraha movement of Mahatma Gandhi, but the militant national struggle led by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and more because of the peasants' struggle, because of the workers' strike. Think of the scenario then. There are huge Kisan movements throughout the country. I'm not going to name them. And this Kisans' rebel against the British rule was because British rule was being commanded through zamindars, through big landlords, so-called Raja Maharajas. They were exploiting, and the Kisans revolt. British imperialists found that this is high time for them to hand over the power. And that was helped by the Second World War, जब कम्युनिस्टों ने रशिया हिटलर को पराजित किया। अल्टीमेटली हिटलर को खुदकशी करना पड़ा। A communist victory helped us to get our independence. Now how to rule? भाई अंग्रेज तो चला जाएंगे, तो हमारा देश को क्या होगा? कौन शासन करेगा हमको? And the Constituent Assembly was formed. There was deliberations for 3 years. I will just give you very important things you must be knowing. 3 साल तक बहस करने के बाद ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन हमने अपनाया। जब कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन रेजोल्यूशन मूव हुआ था, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he was one of the leader of the Indian freedom struggle and first prime minister of our country. उन्होंने कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली के पास ये भाषण दिया था। He said, please remember, he said, you, the learned people who assemble, we are considering the constitution which would really guide us for the future governance. भूलिए मत कि एक क्रांति हमारा मिला है किसानों के सैक्रिफाइस के नाते, ये क्रांति मिला है वर्कर्स को सैक्रिफाइस के नाते। Therefore, make such a constitution which will definitely protect the interest of the Kisans and the workers. They are the majority of the Indian people. ये बात सही था। इसी के नाते वहां पर बहस हुआ था। हम तो ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग हिंदू है। जिन्ना साहब तो पाकिस्तान लेके भाग गए, वो तो चला गया इस्लामों के लिए। तो हमारा भारत में हम तो ज्यादा से ज्यादा हिंदू है। कोई नहीं जानता हिंदू कौन है, हिंदू क्या है, सब कुछ को बता दिया। बगैर इस्लाम, बगैर क्रिश्चियनिटी सब हिंदू है। तो आप सोचेंगे इस बारे में बड़ा बहस करने का जरूरत नहीं है। बट आफ्टर लॉन्ग deliberations in the Constituent Assembly, there was also a demand that it should be Hindu Rashtra. There is an Islamic state, Pakistan, we are becoming Hindustan, therefore it should be Hindus. The Constituent Assembly rejected that idea. Well, नहीं, कभी नहीं, ये हिंदू राष्ट्र नहीं हो सकता है। We the people of India, हम भारत का सब लोग मिलकर तय किया that we will adopt a constitution. What is that constitution? The constitution says that henceforth, after 15th August 1947, India would be ruled by a democratic republic system. Republic means we would be ruled by ourselves. We will decide who will rule, and we'll give them a chance for 5 years. And that constitution said that we want to achieve political justice, economic justice, and social justice. Please keep it in mind. It's very important nowadays. Why we are talking of that constitution is under attack by Modi. Now, Dr. Ambedkar expressed his apprehension. He said, yes, we are giving political justice today. We are entering into a new era. हम नया सड़क पर अभी चलना शुरू किया. हम सबको को पॉलिटिकल जस्टिस दे दिया. इसका मतलब हर आदमी को एक वोट होना चाहिए. Each one will have one vote with equal value. इसका मतलब जो खेती में काम करता है उनका भी एक वोट, और जो जमींदार खेती में काम करता है उनका भी एक वोट. ये जस्टिस हो गया. लेकिन ये जस्टिस हम सही तौर से कैसे अचीव करेंगे, कैसे मिलेगा? ये दोनों एक नहीं हो सकते हैं. जो गरीब भूखा आदमी वो खाने के लिए दूसरे के ऊपर निर्भर करते हैं, वो कैसे वो जमींदार का मुंह को तोड़ पर बताएंगे कि नहीं हमारा वोट आपको नहीं मिलेगा? इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट. अम्बेडकर साहब ने कहा था, बताया था, अनलेस वी सिक्योर इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस, political justice would be a farce and our Indian democracy would be at peril. खत्म हो जाएगा. तो मकसद होना चाहिए, जो सरकार हमने 1947 15 अगस्त का बाद मिला है, इसका ध्यान होना चाहिए, इसका लक्ष्य होना चाहिए कि हमें इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस मिलना चाहिए. इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस का मतलब आप समझ रहे हैं. अगर पॉलिटिकल जस्टिस का मतलब है कि हर आदमी हाँ एक वोट, इक्वल वैल्यू, इन इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस शुड बी दैट एवरीवन शुड हैव इकोनॉमिक पावर. एंड हाउ कैन यू अचीव दिस? द सोशल जस्टिस वुड बी अचीव्ड इफ यू अचीव इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस. एंड यू कैन अचीव दिस, आपको मिल सकता है अगर यू हैव ए फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन, बोलने का स्वाधीनता, चिंतन का स्वाधीनता, फ्रीडम ऑफ थॉट. दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इफ आई कैनॉट हैव ए फ्रीडम ऑफ थिंकिंग, इफ आई कांट थिंक इंडिपेंडेंटली, आई कैनॉट स्पीक आउट व्हाट इज माय नीड. द फ्रीडम ऑफ थॉट एंड फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन ये मिलना चाहिए. हमें फ्रेटर्निटी होना चाहिए एंड डिग्निटी ऑफ पर्सन. हमारा देश में अभी भी डिग्निटी ऑफ पर्सन नहीं है. अभी भी ये अछूत है, ये दलित है, ये अस्पृश्य है. हम ऊंचे घर के हैं, हम ब्राह्मण हैं. दिस कॉन्सेप्ट इज स्टिल अलाइव. आवर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वांटेड टू किल दैट. तो किल कैसे? बंदूक की घरघरा से नहीं. वी हैव टू किल दैट बाय गिविंग इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस एंड एजुकेशन. If we can give education, if we can enlighten every person, then they will feel that we are all equal. And equality is the basic concept of human living. हम सब एक है. मेरा जन्म जो पद्धति है, हम बायोलॉजिकल प्रोसेस, इसमें कोई फर्क नहीं है. अब जहां भी जाओ, बच्चा कैसे जन्म होता है, एक ही कायदा. But the differences were because of political reasons and leading to exploitation. Therefore, the Constitution assured us that we will have a democratic republic. That republic should give us economic justice, social justice, and that should ensure our freedom of faith and freedom of expression, freedom of thought. आप क्या करेंगे ये आप ही का सोच है. मेरा कोई उसमें जिम्मेदारी नहीं है. कोई हक नहीं है आपको बताना ये मत करो. वी हैव टू गिव हिम एजुकेशन, लेट हिम लर्न, लेट ऑल दी फ्लावर्स ब्लूम. ये था हमारा कॉन्सेप्ट. इसी कॉन्सेप्ट पर, इसी आधार पर देश चलना शुरू किया था. अब सोचिए, पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू प्राइम मिनिस्टर होने के बाद 5 इयर्स प्लानिंग करते थे. उसमें बहुत सारे सोशल properties, national properties were built up. The Constitution, in its directive principles of state policy, says that you have fundamental rights. Yes, I have right to move anywhere. I have right to choose any profession. I have right to preach any religion. State will not interfere. ये सरकार का काम ही नहीं है. ये मेरा व्यक्तिगत पसंद की सवाल है. मैं क्या करूं? मैं सिख बनूं, मैं हिंदू बनूं, मैं मुस्लिम बनूं, या मैं क्रिश्चियन बनूं, या मैं कुछ ना बनूं. ये हक हर सिटीजन को होता है. सरकार का काम है इसको ठीक ढंग से मानना. सरकार का कोई ये अधिकार नहीं है इसमें इंटरफेयर करना. लेकिन हमारे बीच में अभी हम क्या देख रहे हैं? हम देख सरकार बदल के हम मंदिर बनाएंगे. ये सरकार की काम है. कौन आदमी उसका फ्रिज में क्या रखते हैं, ये गोश्त रखते हैं कि क्या रखते हैं, तो तुम्हारा क्या काम है? इट्स नॉट योर बिजनेस. दिस इज ए पर्सनल बिजनेस. एंड द पर्सनल आउटलुक, पर्सनल एटीट्यूड हैज टू बी respected. That is the Constitution, because we had secured the Constitution by the struggle of different character. All the people fought. Bhagat Singh fought. Here, Master the Shurja Sen fought. In South, many leaders fought. In West, the brothers fought. Everybody had an intention to fight out the British imperialists, and we have won the freedom with this multicultural, multi-directional freedom struggle. The Constitution says that you have to preserve this. And to ensure that, you have to ensure economic justice. The directive principle state policy, दोनों चैप्टर बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. ये है फंडामेंटल राइट्स. ये इसके बारे में आप सबको जानते हैं. ये मेरा फंडामेंटल राइट है. लेकिन फंडामेंटल राइट का साथ साथ ये डायरेक्टिव किस तरह जाना होगा. जो प्रजातंत्र बना रहा है इसको मकसद क्या होगा, कहां जाएंगे, क्या बनाएंगे, वहां पर बता रहा है कि वी हैव टू एंश्योर, हमें ये निश्चित करना चाहिए देश का जो सारे संपत्ति है इसको ऐसे यूज करो जे ज्यादा से ज्यादा आदमी का इससे सुविधा मिले. यू हैव टू यूटिलाइज योर प्रॉपर्टी. वी हैव ह्यूज प्रॉपर्टी थ्रू आउट द कंट्री. Natural property resources, the satellite property, the human property, all this should be utilized in such a manner that a majority of the people get the benefit, not the minorities. I am talking in the numbers, not religion. Here majority means the majority of the people who need the economic assistance, who need the economic justice and social justice, we have to reach them. This is the purpose of the Constitution. The Constitution says education, you have to assign all. पहले ये बताया था कि 14 बरस तक फ्री एजुकेशन होना चाहिए. कितना सारे टाइम लगा इनको इंप्लीमेंट करने के लिए. सुप्रीम कोर्ट जाना पड़ा, सुप्रीम कोर्ट से ये जजमेंट लाना पड़ा. उसके बाद ये तय हुआ कि हाँ, द एजुकेशन नाउ एट द प्राइमरी लेवल इज द फंडामेंटल राइट. वी से इट शुड बी स्प्रेड थ्रू आउट द कंट्री एंड एट ऑल लेवल. Because education, I repeat, is the foundation of your expression. तो ये चल रहा था. बहुत सारे नेशनल यूनिवर्सिटीज बना था, बहुत सारे नेशनल स्कूल्स बना था. इसमें बहुत सारे आदमी जो पिछड़े वर्ग वो भी आते थे, उनका भी एनलाइटमेंट हुआ था. इससे उन्हें आगे बढ़ रहे थे. इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट चल रहा था. अपने बड़ी दुख से हम लोग सब बताते हैं कि महात्मा गांधी को खून हुआ था. क्यों, किसने खून किया था? वो आरएसएस बल तो सही है, ठीक है, आरएसएस बल, लेकिन उनका क्या मकसद था? व्हाट वाज हिज मेंटल एंड साइकोलॉजिकल डेवलपमेंट? ही सेड आई एम ए ब्राह्मण, आई एम ए ब्राह्मण ऑफ हायर क्लास. एंड महात्मा गांधी सेज that the common people, peripheral people, marginal people, they should also be a part of Hindu culture, which the Brahmin, Chitpavan Brahmins do not accept. And that is the reason he killed Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, I killed him. Why did I kill him? Because I find that he is a Muslim lover. Indian born people who have been residing over there for centuries. They are my brothers. They cannot be my enemy. But this was his idea by which he killed Mahatma Gandhi. But after killing Mahatma Gandhi, the RSS people who had the concept of upper caste religious domination डर गए, छुपा गए. लेकिन धीरे धीरे अंदर अंदर में काम कर रहे थे कि ये बात समझाओ कि हिंदू राष्ट्र ही चाहिए. एंड आफ्टर एक्सेशन ऑफ पावर ऑफ मिस्टर मोदी, वाजपेयी जी भी बीजेपी का प्राइम मिनिस्टर था, लेकिन उन्हें इतना सारा कोशिश नहीं किया कि अभी हिंदू राष्ट्र बनाओ. वो भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का आधार पर चलने का थोड़ा थोड़ा कोशिश किया था. डाइवर्शन हुआ था, ठीक है. अयोध्या राम यात्रा हुआ, उसमें पूरा देश में शोर मचाया, डिविजन हुआ, ये हुआ था. फिर भी उन्होंने ये तय किया था कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का आधार पर हमें चलना चाहिए. उन्होंने बताया था मोदी जी को राजधर्म पालन करो, डोंट एनकरेज genocide in the name of religion. Those days are gone. Now Modi is back to power. Modi is militant RSS political face. And that's why his attempt is to change the constitution. How it can be changed? Why the constitution is under attack? The constitution is under attack because they don't believe the theory of economic justice or social justice. आपने देखा है बिल्किस बानो. These are instances. Not only one instance would you give a signal. ये कहाँ जा रहा है हमारा देश. ये लड़की वो उसको रेप हुआ था, कानून ने उनको सजा दिया, लेकिन सरकार ने उनको मुक्त कर दिया. मुक्त करने का उनका क्या लॉजिक था? उन्होंने बताया कि ये जो आदमी जिसको खिलाफ कोर्ट जजमेंट दिया था, दर्शक बनाया था, वो दर्शक नहीं था, ये उनका राइट है. अपर कास्ट ब्राह्मण हैज एवरी राइट एज पर मोनुस्मृति फिलॉसफी टू एंजॉय लोअर कास्ट वीमेन, एंड दैट इज देयर राइट. द गवर्नमेंट वेरी कनिंगली accepted that. Therefore, the equality under the constitution is under attack. Economic justice. You have seen that during the pandemic, all data were given by other co-speakers. I am not going to take you to data. More than 3.9 crores of middle class came down to below poverty line. जो मध्य वर्गीय था वो नीचे आ गया, गरीब के नीचे. और एक आदमी का कितना वेल्थ बढ़ गया, विश्व में 2 नंबर बन गया अदानी. क्यों बना? हमारा सरकारी जितना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर था जो हमारे पैसे से बना हुआ था. सोचिए एयरपोर्ट्स, सोचिए पोर्ट, सब कुछ हमने दे दिया अदानी को. इसी आधार पर उन्होंने इतना पैसा कमाया कि विश्व में 1 नंबर पे 2 नंबर पे आ गया था. वो भी फ्रॉड था. आज तो हम देख रहे हैं कि हमारे इकोनॉमी में बहुत धक्का आ गया. क्यों आया? कि पॉलिटिकल पावर under the reign of Modi has been contributing deliberately to see that economic justice is not the consideration, economic disparity is being raised. That's why India is under constitution, our constitution under threat. The constitution thought of republic. How the republic will function? There are many organs. One of the organ is best judiciary. हमारा हर जगह में कोई नागरिक का लास्ट रिसोर्ट होता है जुडिशियरी. उन्होंने जुडिशियरी को भी अपना पक्ष में लेने के लिए बहुत सारे कौशल लगा रहे हैं. तो देखा है, हम जज नियोग करेंगे. नियोग करने का क्या तरीका होगा? सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट में तय किया. कॉलेजियम सिस्टम होगा. इसमें सब कुछ ठीक है, ये बात कोई नहीं बताता है, लेकिन ये सिस्टम है. इस सिस्टम आने से हम इंश्योर किया कि एग्जीक्यूटिव उनका ज्यादा डोमिनेंस ना रहे. judges must be neutral while deciding cases. And you want to say, no, judges must decide according to our desire. हम जो चाहता है वही करना चाहिए. इसी से उन्होंने राम मंदिर का जो राय निकाला, क्या विरोध था सुप्रीम कोर्ट में? जमीन का विरोध, उसको हटा के ये तय किया यहां पर मंदिर बनाओ, वहां पर उनको दे दो, वहां बनाएंगे मस्जिद. ये कि सरकार के काम नहीं है, ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का खिलाफ है. ये जुडिशियरी को अपना पक्ष में लाने के लिए एक कोशिश है, साजिश है. इलेक्शन कमीशन आप देख रहे हैं हर जगह में, द गवर्नर्स, all these key posts, constitutional posts, are now being used for the purpose of controlling the dissent voice. हमने बताया थे फ्रीडम ऑफ थॉट एंड फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन. मेरा ये हम चाहते हैं कि हम बताएं ये लाल है, ये काला है. अब बताएंगे तो लाल बताया क्यों? जाओ तुम श्रीघर में जाओ. जर्नलिस्ट को पकड़कर वो अंदर में प्रिजन में भेज देते हैं. क्यों? ने जर्नलिस्ट ने बताया कि मैंने देखा है यहां पर जो धर्षण हुआ है, यहां पर जो दल बलात्कार हुआ है, इसके जो जिम्मेदार है वो जिम्मेदार इसी किस्म का जिम्मेदार है. तो उनको जाओ तुम प्रिजन में जाओ. अगर कोई काम होता है जहां पर हम देख रहे हैं कि कोई रिलीजियस माइनॉरिटी कुछ कर रहे हैं, गलत काम कर रहे हैं, तो इसको तो गलत काम जो कर रहे हैं इसको सुधारने के लिए कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मीन्स वेज आर देयर. तो आप पूरा कम्युनिटी का खिलाफ लगा रहे हैं, जहां ये कम्युनिटी हमारा दुश्मन है. अब एक छोटे बात बताएंगे. ये लोग हर वक्त स्वामी विवेकानंद जी का शरण करते हैं. तो स्वामी विवेकानंद जी रिलीजियस कांग्रेगेशन हुआ था शिकागो में, हुआ जगह बताया था जहां हम ऐसा एक देश से आ रहे हैं जो वर्षों से सालों से जो निपीड़ित है उनको लिए सड़क है. We have given shelter to all the persecuted person from the persecutors of the world. This is the country we live in. हमने क्या देखा? उन्हें CAA NRC लगा के क्या चाहते हैं? यह भी धर्म का खेल. Those are all against the basic principles of Constitution. I will not take much of your time. That's why we say the Constitution is under attack. If we cannot keep the Constitution intact, तो क्या होगा? ये आप सोच रहे थे क्या है भाई, Constitution ये चला जाएगा वो आएगा? No, that will destroy the diversity. बाग में हर किस्म का फूल जब होता है तब बाग का सुहाग होता है. मालिक का काम होता है कि बाग में हर किस्म का फूलों का चाष करो, एक किस्म का नहीं. दिस इज द नेचर. अगर हमें नेचर को ना माने then we'll be out of consideration and India will again be fragmented. We have seen how India was partitioned, how India was divided on the ground of religion. And now if this division continues, which is a danger today, we will be again bifurcated and we again be diversified. फिर तोड़ेंगे. किस लिए? क्योंकि तोड़ने से आम जनता का जो एकजुट होकर लड़ाई होता है शोषण के खिलाफ, वो थोड़ा वीक हो जाएगा. आप जो काम करते हैं, आप जो जेन्युइन प्रोलेटेरियट है, खेत मजदूर लोग बताए कि भाई उसको बात छोड़ो, अभी तुम धर्म बचाओ. भाई मेरे खाना नहीं मिलता है, खाना का बात छोड़ो, पहले धर्म बचाओ. आप धर्म के नाते आपके दोस्त को भी आप को कत्ल करेंगे. ये फिलॉसफी इन लोग कोशिश कर रहे हैं अपना के लिए, which is against the constitutional principle. And much of your time, I would therefore appeal to all of you, please let us understand the basic tenets of the Constitution. And basic tenets of the Constitution is plurality, diversity, and unity. Unity in diversity, that is the basic concept of federalism. That is the basic concept of constitutionalism. उनको हमको कोशिश करना है बचाने के लिए, उनको प्रिजर्व करने के लिए, स्प्रेड करने के लिए. ये काम हमको करना पड़ेगा. मेरा पूरा विश्वास है आप ये काम करेंगे. विद दिस आई थैंक यू ऑल. नमस्ते.
So, comrades, this session, which was started at 5 o'clock, now it's almost 7:30. So, in these 150 minutes, all our district
ভাত খাবার পর মুখে দিয়ে চেবাও মুখ শুদ্ধি, কারণ পক্ষ নেবার আগে বিচার করো দিয়ে বুদ্ধি। হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ গাইজ, ওয়েলকাম টু বদ্দার আদালত। রোস্টিংটাকে সাইডে রেখে আজকে কিছু বিষয় নিয়ে আলোচনা হবে দিয়ে যুক্তি।
দাদাগিরির মঞ্চে বড় বড় ক্রিয়েটরদের ডাকা হয়েছিল, তার মধ্যে একজন খুদে ছোট ক্রিয়েটর ঢুকে গেছিল যার নাম দুর্বাদে, তাই জন্য একজন বড় ক্রিয়েটর খুব রেগে গেছেন, তাকে কেন ডাকা হয়নি।
হ্যাঁ গৌরব তাপাদার দাদা, তুমি ডিরেক্টলি আমার নাম না নিলেও ডিরেক্টলি যে আমাকেই কথাগুলো বলছো সেটা
না